everybody, and welcome to the Whale Tales podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Sarah, and together we are the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Today, we are diving into the wild world of cetacean parenting strategies, plus talking about twins.
Ooh! Also, of course, we have a super exciting story for you, starring one of our favorite mothers.
Aww. So get comfy, because it's going to be a mother of an episode.
Okay, so speaking of mothers, Mother's Day has just happened when you are listening to this podcast, and Father's Day will be happening shortly. So we decided that for our discussion on this episode, we wanted to talk about parenting strategies to celebrate mothers and fathers. Except, sorry dads, you don't really have anything to do in any cetacean population anywhere. Dads just don't. Sorry, we love you, but cetacean babies maybe not so much, and that's why you're not involved. So we'll be focusing on mothering strategies. In researching for this, we found that a lot of mothering strategies are similar between different groups of toothed whales, and that those strategies are very, very different from the strategies that baleen whales have as mothers. So, Lindsay, do you want to talk about maybe some of the things that are similar between the toothed whales and baleen whales when it comes to their mothering strategies? And then we'll talk about differences after.
Yeah, so, something that we start off with that comes to absolutely no surprise is that both toothed whales and baleen whales nurse their young. It's one of the main definitions of being a mammal is nursing your young, having mammary glands, which we'll talk about more later. So yes, they all nurse their young. Then there's a couple of other ones that also kind of make sense from all animal points of view. They protect their calves from predators. And then they also do this kind of thing that's called slipstreaming or carrying. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with the kinds of, when the Tour de France, bike guys, they all lean in behind the other bike guys, and then they're in their slipstream, and then they don't have to pedal as hard because of the air. I don't really understand how it works. It's something to do with physics, but it's a similar aspect of whales. They also have a slipstream because they're giant and they're moving at a decent speed through the water, and so their calves are always very close to them to be protected and to stay close, and for lots of different reasons, but they do slipstream, so they don't have to expend as much energy when they're moving. They've also been known, both toothed whales and baleen whales, to carry. I'm using quotations, even though you can't see me, Mark. So sometimes they'll be kind of like half on, half off of their mothers, or sometimes they're on them, but not for very long, and not really for the purpose of carrying, but more definitely for fun, especially as the calves grow older. Whale calves are very rambunctious across all kinds, and they love to play. So there's lots of different footage, especially of humpback calves, who are adorable, even though they're 15 feet long. Just rolling all over their mothers, and their mothers just being like, ugh, I haven't eaten in 6 months, leave me alone. I've been pregnant for 17 months or whatever. I don't know how long humpbacks is, 12? Something. But yes, so they do that. And then there's also cultural transmission or teaching. So similarly to humans, of course, and other large mammals, whales do teach their offspring how to do things, including hunt and breach and whatever else.
Plus breathe.
Yes, also breathe.
Which is, a thing that they actually do have to learn, which is weird.
The first breath is instinctual, as we know. Once a whale being born is a crazy thing because it comes out tail first, and then they directly go to the surface, and then after that they're like, "Wait, how did I do that? Did I jump out of the water every single time and expend all of my energy to breathe?" And the moms are like, "No, do this. Just lie here and open your blowhole." So there's breathing, and then there's also finding food, but also, and then playing, which also has a lot, some play behaviors are also important for other things, like cleaning your body off of certain things, like breaching can be used to remove unwanted barnacles or something like that, and also to look to see what's going around you, and also to communicate with other whales, which we'll get into, I'm sure, one day. But all of these behaviors that you see in animals, regardless of whether or not they seem like play or not, are taught and also are important for their lives and their survival. Sarah, do you want to talk to us about some of the strategies that only baleen whales have?
Sure. So the biggest thing for baleen whales is that they tend to be migratory. And so they are in one place during fall, the colder parts of the year, and in another place in the warmer parts of the year. And usually when they're in the colder area, that's where they do all their feeding. Baleen whales eat krill and other small animals that live in the water column. And those are really only available in cold areas. But those cold areas are not great places to have babies. So these baleen whales do usually some sort of migration to nursing or a calving area, and that's where they will give birth to their young. And because of that, baleen whale moms don't get to eat while they're nursing.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That sounds awful. Awful, because I've never been more hungry in my entire life, including while I was pregnant, than I am when nursing my son. It's ridiculous.
And your milk is only, what, 17%?
Yeah.
Of fat? And, like, whale milk is, like, in its 20s and 30% fat. So they're losing so much more of their fat than
they have
humans.
A lot more body mass.
That's true. They do.
Yeah, so they fast while nursing, and then I think probably because of that, their calves end up weaning relatively early compared to toothed whales, usually at around a year and a half. And that's like a pretty hard limit. Like they don't end up having as close of a relationship, and so yeah, the mother whales wean their calves, and that's kind of it. Like sometimes they'll be seen with their calves for a bit longer, but yeah, I think it's pretty hard for baleen whales to nurse their babies. Like they're not eating, and they're somewhere that they can't eat until they do a huge migration in some cases. And then the reason that they don't give birth in the places where the krill live is because also things that like to eat baby baleen whales live there, like sharks and killer whales. So yeah, they go to somewhere safer for the calf, but less nutrient rich for the mothers. So that was an interesting, I think that's probably the biggest thing that baleen whales do. There's a bunch of things that baleen whales don't do that toothed whales do. So Nick, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, absolutely. I'm just thinking about what a shock to the system it must be for baby baleen whales, because sometimes it's shorter than a year and a half. Sometimes it's like 6 months after you were born if you get to the feeding grounds for some species, and it's like, see ya! You're in a completely different part of the world, and I'm going to teach you how to get food, and then there you go. But toothed whales are very, very different. And probably the socialization and the relationship is the biggest difference between toothed whales. Now, of course, all of the things that we're talking about, we can't say for sure are the case for every species of baleen whale and every species of toothed whale, including dolphins and porpoises, because we don't know that for all species. There's a lot of species of cetacean that have been very, very poorly researched. But in general, from what we do know, toothed whales, dolphins, and porpoises tend to build very strong relationships with their young. In some cases, this relationship can last for the entire life of the mom and calf, whichever one is alive longer. And in some cases, it's just for, 5 to 10 years, but still, that's a really long time in the lives of these animals. Killer whales, for example, the southern residents and the northern residents here in British Columbia are notorious for the fact that calves stay with their mother their entire life. And especially for the male calves, they're all called mama's boys because they just want to stay with mama all the time. But this relationship is really, really important because they do nurse longer, but it also allows for a much larger transference of knowledge and culture. Specifically, vocalizations are taught this way, regular hunting patterns and sort of traveling, because it's not sort of a geographic migration that a lot of toothed whales do, but more of a following prey as it's going around in crazy weird ways through ocean currents. And so that takes a lot of time to teach young animals. So that's definitely something that comes from the socialization. Also, what's really distinctly different between toothed whales and baleen whales when it comes to their calves is with baleen whales, there's obviously quite a lot of socialization between mother and calf while they are together, but they actively, in a lot of cases, specifically humpback whales, avoid any other members of their species for socialization. So it's mom and calf for as long as they're together, and then nobody else gets to see that calf until, boom, I'm leaving you alone, and you can go off and, hang out with whatever you want. But with toothed whales, because they're generally traveling in larger groups anyway, whatever it is that they're doing, that calf socializes not just with their mother, but frequently with many other members of their family, whether they're blood related or not. Belugas especially travel in very, very large groups of mothers and calves, sometimes hundreds at a time, all traveling together. So those animals are likely not all related, but there's sort of anti-belugas that get turned into daycare services and are taking care of sometimes 5, 6, 7 calves all at once while moms are, having coffee somewhere. Or just away from their calves. So there's a lot more socialization with other members of their species in the toothed whale group. And that close family relationship is really, really important there as well. The other thing that seems to be unique to toothed whales, though again, this could be entirely due to lack of study, is the fact that there is distinct vocal recognition between mother and calf in all toothed whale groups that have been able to be studied this way. That's a roundabout way of saying that it's really, really, really hard to study the vocalizations and specifically what the vocalizations mean of any species of cetacean. But in bottlenose dolphins and beluga whales, for sure, there is published scientific research that shows that calves receive distinct vocal patterns. In bottlenose dolphins, they're called signature whistles, and in beluga whales, they're called contact calls that are unique to the calf and sometimes even the calf and mother pair. So there's a call that the calf will make that only that calf's mother responds to and responds with a specific call back to that calf. And that's called the contact call, and that's how the mother and baby can keep in contact with each other in that situation where you're a beluga and there's, 100 moms and 100 babies. Which one's my mom? I was just hanging out with Auntie Sarah. And in the dolphins, the signature whistle is the best way to describe it. It's like the dolphin's name. At least that's how researchers kind of try to describe it, is that signature whistle is that animal's whistle, and it's the only animal that makes that signature whistle. And other dolphins, not just that dolphin's mom, but other dolphins recognize that signature whistle and can make it when they're trying to communicate with that dolphin.
So cool.
Yeah. One thing that was really kind of funny when I was researching for this is, in general, it's to your benefit as a mother, whether you're a toothed whale or a baleen whale, to only nurse your own calf. It's, whether you're a baleen whale or a toothed whale, there's a lot of energy that you're expending to nurse your calf, and you obviously want your genetic material to continue on. But in both toothed whales and baleen whales, there have been cases of mistaken identity nursing, as it was. And the difference seems to be that in baleen whales, the calves try to nurse off of this. This was research I was looking at with bowhead whales. And it seemed that sometimes when bowhead whales were together, even though they were trying to kind of avoid each other, the calves would get lost in this sort of geographic area where there were a few moms and might try to nurse off another mom, and that mom would get mad and would actively bat them out of the way. So in baleen whales, mistaken identity nursing gets, if it happens at all, and it's pretty rare to see happen, but if it does happen, the mothers actively put a stop to it, whereas the toothed whales take a very different, much more laissez-faire approach. They don't go off searching for nursing from others most of the time, although again there's some research to suggest that at least in beluga whales, belugas could possibly spontaneously nurse, and so may sort of either adopt a calf and start nursing them, or those anti-belugas might actually be nursing a whole bunch of different calves. But when mistaken identity nursing happens, they're kind of like, okay.
Yep.
Sure.
That's probably has to do with the fact that they ate that day.
Yeah, probably.
They're not
And also
6 months worth of hangry.
Yeah, and also the calf that they could be nursing could be like their niece or something, or closely related, more so than in baleen whales, just because they hang out with their family groups.
Yeah.
In some species, anyways.
I just thought the picture of a baleen whale, a bowhead whale, swatting away a calf. It's just pretty ridiculous.
Not happening.
No milk for you. So that is a brief summary, I guess, a brief summary of everything that we know about the mothering strategies out there in the cetacean world, or at least everything that we could find while we were researching for this podcast. But definitely, if you, listener, have come across some research on different techniques that mother whales, dolphins, and porpoises have, we would love to hear about it. Because this was fascinating.
Who knew there were so many different ways to be a whale mummy?
I know.
They all do lots and lots and lots of work. Whether they're baleen moms or toothed moms, they do a lot of work. So thankfully, they only have one calf to take care of at a time.
Yeah, which leads us into our fun flipper fact, which is something that you may be wondering about, which is twins. They typically only have one calf. In incidences of twins is believed to be less than 1% of all cetaceans' births are twins, and again, that's, cetacean births that we've seen. It's hard to know this. And there's always going to be the chance that there was twins and one didn't survive until the researchers saw it and was able to report it. But the chances are pretty high that it's a single calf birth. And Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about why we know that?
There's a few reasons. One is that whales are pretty big, but whale calves proportionally are also quite large. So there's not a lot of room in a whale womb for two full-size whale babies. Like, they have to come out and they have to be able to swim on their own. They have to be able to get to the surface on their own. So they have to be fairly well advanced compared to, like, I don't know, humans. Kangaroos, yeah. Especially kangaroos. Bunnies, etc. that sort of don't, like, especially the breathing, I think, is the biggest one. Like, yes, deer and horses and stuff come out, like, basically able to walk from minute one, but they don't have to, like, be able to walk well enough to get up to the surface of the air, of the water, to breathe, right? So they have to be fairly well developed, so there's not a lot of room in there. As well as I was talking about earlier with especially baleen whales, but all whales, it takes a lot of energy to nurse these whale calves. They're expending a lot of energy, they're having to put on a ton of blubber. For baleen whales, they are not eating while nursing. For all whales, their milk fat of their milk is intense, so the amount of calories that the mother is having to spend to nurse one calf is insane. Also, just, like, picture in your mind how whale nursing would work. It's a complicated process. It takes some time to learn, and it takes, like, a lot of coordination between mother and calf to, like, get good at it, and so I don't think there's any way that you'd have enough time in the day to nurse two babies. Like, yeah.
God, no.
It would be insane. Yeah. So, yeah, we've all seen beluga whales in particular nursing, and it's an interesting process to watch. Like, everybody has to learn what they're doing. The nipple is, like, down near the tail, kind of where you'd expect it to be, based on looking at a whale and where all their genitalia and stuff are. But, yeah, the mother whale has to, like, lift her tail up in just the right position and, like, swim fast but not too fast, and it's a coordinated effort. So
that's the crazy thing to me, is that it's also happening while they're both swimming.
Yeah, and not breathing.
Yeah, no,
Well, the
exactly.
mother could be at the surface, but not necessarily.
No. Well, and I just think about,
so that's crazy.
I had some troubles nursing my son when he was first born. It took us a couple of days, almost a week, to kind of figure that out. Every other mom in the prenatal group that my husband and I went to when we got back together for a reunion when my son was a couple months old, every other mom in that class also had some amount of problems, and some never got over it and weren't actually able to nurse their children. And I'm just like, how did whales survive?
Yeah, I know.
Determination.
Yeah.
And they, had to do it swimming and not breathing.
Yeah.
So many reasons that whales wouldn't have twins. But Nicole, there are a few documented incidents of twins. So do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Yes. So there's sort of two different documentations of twins. There is only one known documented case of a twin surviving, and not both of them survived. So we'll start with that. There are 0 cases that have ever been known, either in human care or in the ocean, where twins have been born to a cetacean mom and both of those twins have survived. That doesn't happen, to our knowledge. However, there was a set of beluga twins born in the SeaWorld in San Antonio in June 2009. And the male twin, unfortunately, was stillborn, but the female twin was born viable and did survive. Her name was Bella. And that was thought to be, in 2009, the first, and still to this day, only documented case of a twin surviving in either human care or out in the ocean. And I say thought to be because when I was researching this, I did actually happen upon one other case of a twin thought to have survived in the northern resident community of killer whales here in British Columbia. And for a very, very long time, there was thought to be a twin alive and thriving with calves of her own. But I've researched that more, and if you stay tuned to our next episode's fun fact, you will learn more about that story.
Ooh, tantalizing.
Yeah. But the other cool thing that we do know is not just, we're sure that twins are born out in the ocean, like that absolutely does happen. But again, it's thought that likely neither twin survives because, as Sarah was saying, probably both of them aren't developed well enough by the time that they're born to be able to actually survive. So the other thing that we know that happens, even though also, unfortunately, these animals aren't viable and they don't survive, is that conjoined calves are born, where 2 fetuses sort of become conjoined or joined up, or a lot of people know this as the Siamese twin syndrome, in utero, and develop to some extent, and then are born, and you assumedly are stillborn. And we know that this happens because, at least based on everything I could find, there have been 7 documented cases of this where the calves, I guess you would say, wash up. So I couldn't find what each of those 7 cases were, but the 3 that I could were super interesting, because they actually covered the 3 different groups of cetaceans. In January of 2014, in California, in Baja California, people found a conjoined gray whale calf. So a 2-headed gray whale calf.
Oh.
Yeah, they're all 2-headed, actually. That's all, and that's not to say that there aren't conjoined calves of different persuasions born, but the only ones that have been documented washed up on shore are 2-headed. So yeah, that was a 2-headed gray whale calf. The pictures of that are crazy cool. And then also in 2014, but in August, in Turkey, a 2-headed bottlenose dolphin calf was found on the beach. And that was documented by National Geographic, and that's where I'm getting the 7 documented cases, because that was thought to be the 5th documented case, but they weren't counting the gray whale earlier that year. And then third was just 2 years ago, in June of 2017, a 2-headed harbor porpoise washed up in the Netherlands.
So crazy.
Yeah. So we will include pictures of all of those in our show notes or links to the news articles where these were found, because they are really strange and interesting.
Yeah. Also in the show notes, I will put the first ever footage of when they put a GoPro on a humpback calf, so you can see what nursing looks like from a humpback, from a calf point of view. So you get a little bit of idea of just how complicated it is. Because anytime you watch GoPro footage of a whale, you're like, this is harder than I was expecting it to be.
So yeah, that was our fun flipper fact for this month's episode.
Oh, I forgot the song. Fun flipper facts. Fun flipper facts. It's time for fun flipper facts. Yeah.
So that brings us to our whale tale for this week, and this is one of my favorite whale tales in our whole collection, and one of my favorite animals that we have been lucky to see up here in British Columbia. So Nicole's going to tell the story, but there's a little background information that will help you appreciate it even more. It's about a humpback, and so here in British Columbia, through the 1960s or so, humpbacks were being hunted here, like a lot of whales and like in a lot of areas. And so the humpback population was down to possibly around 1,400 individuals, which is not very many. But in the last, I don't know, decade, 20 years, the humpback population has been going great. There's been a lot of effort to restore forage fish populations, and I think that's helped. Also, like, not hunting them anymore has helped. So there's about 18 to 20,000 individual humpbacks that are seen throughout British Columbia, and humpbacks in BC are mostly here through April to October-ish. A few sometimes stick around year-round. It's sort of unpredictable, but the bulk of humpbacks are here from April to October. And then in October, they start heading south down to mostly Hawaii and Mexico, I think, from here, different groups. And they go there to mate and have babies. And then when they're up here in British Columbia and north of here as well, they are chowing down on all kinds of krill. So yeah, I think we're pretty lucky to have such a robust humpback population and come back in British Columbia. And Nicole has a really great story about one of our favorite humpback individuals.
Yes, we do have a story that I want to share about probably my favorite humpback whale. Her name is Big Mama. So Lindsay will share after the story a little bit about Big Mama and why she's so famous around these parts. But I love her a lot because she's a great mom, and she's also the first humpback whale that I knew how to identify. So she's got a very distinct fluke pattern, which helps a lot, and she also has a habit of fluking perfectly every time, because sometimes it can be really hard to tell these animals apart when you're out in rough seas. So this particular story about Big Mama that I want to share happened in July of 2015. I was working part-time as a whale watch naturalist at that point, and I was out with my boat of passengers looking for killer whales, because that's all usually anybody wants to see when they go whale watching in British Columbia. And there weren't any whales that we sort of knew of in the area at that time, and we were actually headed home after a very long 4 hours of searching for orcas. And when you have a crew and passengers of 25 people on board a vessel who have been out on the water getting progressively more and more depressed that they, first of all, aren't seeing killer whales, but second of all, aren't really seeing anything except the beautiful scenery that we have on the water in British Columbia, and you're starting to head home, it can start to feel a little like you're gonna get thrown off the boat on the way home. So we were coming back through pretty much the last stretch of the Gulf Islands before you head across the Strait of Georgia right back to Vancouver, where our berth was. And it's very rare to see anything in the Strait of Georgia because it's a big body of water and you're going very, very quickly through that. So I wasn't having any high hopes for seeing anything as we were going to head home. But as we were heading through this last channel before we get into the Strait of Georgia, it's called Active Pass. Out of nowhere, pretty much, we saw two huge blows. So I knew right away they weren't killer whales, but I actually love seeing species other than killer whales, and I particularly love when I see them with a group of passengers and can maybe change their minds and show them that killer whales aren't the only awesome things living in British Columbia. So we turned towards the blows, and pretty much right off of the side of the vessel, we were so perfectly timed, because if we'd been just 5 minutes earlier, we would have already crossed into the Strait of Georgia and been going too fast to see them. They would have been behind us and never knew about it. We're two awesome humpback whales, and we stuck around with them for about half an hour, and we watched, and we figured out that one was Big Mama. The other one that she was with, I presumed was her calf, because like we've already talked about in this episode, these animals aren't usually traveling together when they're migrating. They may be kind of around each other, but they're not necessarily socializing with each other. And these two whales were clearly socializing with each other, and clearly not just traveling next to each other, but traveling together. They were interacting with each other, and they were surfacing at the same time and fluking at the same time. Though unfortunately, the second animal never fluked in our direction, so I didn't get a good picture and couldn't really tell who it was. So I don't have any clear consensus that it was Big Mama's calf. And the one thing that did throw me off a little bit was it was also big. Now, Big Mama has a very successful history of calving, and so she's obviously got real fatty milk, and she's really, really good at bulking herself up to have more calves. But this animal looked a little bit long to be a calf at the age that you would expect in July on their migration. So who knows, but it was really awesome, and so great to see Big Mama, and so great to see these two animals healthy and happy together, and to share the story with my passengers of the humpback comeback. And I did end up having a lot of people on board being really, really happy that they had the opportunity to see these amazing animals, and they weren't disappointed that they didn't see killer whales. So that is a good day.
Hooray! Yeah. So, as we said, some stats on Big Mama, also known as BCY0324, is her official number, and that's a whole other thing about why they're named that way, why the numbers and the letters and all of that, and that's a whole other thing that we could talk about forever, so we're just not going to. But Big Mama was sighted for the first time, that we recited basically for the first time in Victoria in 1997. They didn't know, of course, who she was. They just got a fluke shot of her, but she was one of the very first humpbacks to be seen in the Strait of Juan de Fuca in nearly 100 years. So after all of the hunting and everything, after the humpbacks started to finally come back to the Sailor's Sea, she was one of the first ones, and so she's really important for that reason. And then she just became this celebrity over the next 22 years, because she is named the way she is because she has at least 6 or 7 calves, some of which have now had calves, so she is Big Grandmama. So she had a calf in 2003, in 2006, who is split fin, in 2010, in 2012, in 24, who was known as Beak, who I've never heard of. And the most recent one is 2016's calf known as Pop-Tart, who was just seen 2 days ago swimming with a gray whale, which was weird. But she, they is alive and thriving. So she produces a lot of great calves. And we have seen her this...
It's not impossible. It's rare that humpbacks stay with their moms past that sort of annual migration, but it's not impossible that the humpback that I saw Big Mama with in 2015 was actually Beak, her calf from 2014, because
correct,
that has happened.
Yeah, and be like, you got to think about the math. Beak was born in 2014, so she was that calf would have been spotted here in this first time in the summer of 2014, and then potentially respotted, because also we don't know, not necessarily with Big Mama, but some humpbacks do stay here all year round. They definitely well, it's not every year, even though Big Mama definitely has had some years where she shows up in one summer with a calf, and then next summer she's not with a calf, and the next summer she is. So due to gestation, she would be pregnant in this other summer. So basically, like every winter, she either gives birth or gets pregnant. And she definitely was doing that for a while, but we don't know. So that could have been Beak for sure. Been like a year and a half, which would make more sense for the size that you saw.
Although she would have been pregnant with Pop-Tart at that point.
She would have been, yeah. So Big Mama was seen in Hawaii during the Splash Project, which we'll link to. It's basically was this huge cataloging of all the humpbacks that we could see to get numbers and to get IDs and to get an understanding of where the whales in BC were migrating to. So we know that she is a Hawaii whale. She was also seen in 2006. Sorry, that would have been the Splash Project, 2006. And she was also seen in Hawaii in February 2018. And just recently, she was seen twice in Hawaii in March this year. So she's, we don't know if she's on her way back now. Probably. But she hasn't been seen here yet, because that would be super fast to get here from Hawaii. And a lot of this more recent info we have of her with the sightings, especially with the Hawaii stuff, since like we saw her in 2006 there, but nothing until last year, is due to our friends at Happy Whale.
Yay, Happy Whale.
Yeah, who are a great project kind of taking over where the Splash Project stopped, which is and using a lot of great citizen science of cataloging whales and where they were seen and when they were seen. And we'll put a link to the show notes, and we post about them all the time about... They have this kind of thing that I like to think about. It's like a CSI-like database to identify flukes. They have great algorithms and things to help identify flukes that are unknown so that they can match them up to different kinds of whales, but they also are great at keeping track. So that's how we know that Big Mama was seen twice in March in Hawaii this year, and that she was seen multiple times whenever last summer here, and et cetera, and that is with all sorts of whales. Humpback whales, they do a lot of other ones, sperm whales and blue whales and all sorts of things, and they have some amazing, really long migration patterns that they've been able to match, and really long sightings rematches of like 20 years of whale being seen and then a whale being seen again that they've been able to do, and it's super cool to see what they're doing, and now we know where she is. We're spying on her.
Yeah.
And that's how we get some stories. Yeah.
If you want to also spy on Big Mama or other humpback whales, you can check out our website. We've got a whole bunch, about almost 200 humpback stories, and a bunch that are specifically Big Mama. So on our website, you can just search Big Mama, or you can search humpback, and that'll bring you to all kinds of awesome humpback stories on our website, whaletales.org.
Yeah.
It'll be in the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
Yay! Okay, and before we wrap up our episode, we want to talk about the fact that summer is coming. And in particular, we wanted to share some things that you can do to help whales, dolphins, and porpoises that have to do with the summertime. So, Lindsay, can you tell us how we can be safe on the water and keep these animals safe?
So, as summer approaches, we want to remind everyone to stay at least 200 meters away from all wild whales, and that is in a boat, in the water. If you're swimming, on a paddleboard or a kayak or anything small like that, you can still harm the whales if you're in a small vessel, and the whales could harm you just by being whales. And also from the air. Drones are very new, and their technology is pretty cool, and you can get amazing footage from them, but they can still cause disturbances for whales. They do make noise, and you don't have 100% control over them, so please keep them at least 200 meters above whales at all times. In the Salish Sea, there has been new regulations announced starting June 1st, so just a couple of days after this podcast goes live. The regulations are now that you must stay at least 400 meters away from all killer whales in the Salish Sea and off the coast of BC. Whale watching companies can apply to have certificates to go closer to non-southern residents, so bigs or transient killer whales. And again, that's a great thing to check when you're looking into different whale watch companies, to make sure they're following the guidelines and they're responsible with all wildlife, but that they also have that certificate before you go whale watching with them, regardless of the kinds of killer whales that you're seeing. So again, 200 meters away from all wild whales, dolphins, and porpoises from however you may be viewing them, whatever platform, and 400 meters away from all southern resident killer whales, or any killer whale in BC if you're unsure of the ecotype, just to be sure. And something to keep in mind as we head into summer up here in Canada, and an important reminder for any time you are on the water, regardless of where you live.
And I thought I would talk a bit about what you can do if you're not on the water, or this also applies if you're on the water, but it's more about like what you bring with you to an outdoor environment. So one of our favorite things to do when we hang out in the summertime is have a picnic. And so we try to bring, stuff in reusable water bottles, reusable containers, and make sure even if they're not reusable, that we take our trash and dispose of it responsibly. Don't leave it for the wind to take to the ocean. One thing that I think a lot of us do is, you don't need to have a big fancy picnic blanket. Old sheets or old blankets that are, you don't like to use in your bed anymore are great picnic blankets. And I always try to have a reusable, like one of those reusable cold sippy cups or like straw cups, because you never know when you just like really want like an iced tea or something fancy, and you want to make sure that you're treating yourself but also being responsible for the environment. And I guess the last big find that I've had the last little few years, I guess, has been using mineral sunscreen. It's usually better for the ocean. I've also found, as somebody who has really sensitive skin, that it's been way better for my skin. And I've gotten like solid mineral sunscreen, so it comes in like almost like a little mini deodorant. Not as good for face, but really good for body because it's really easy to put on. It's not messy. It's not going to leak in your bag, so you can just have them hanging out. And they're usually in like easily recyclable and recycled plastic containers. And then the mineral sunscreen doesn't have any weird chemicals that can have strange interactions when they enter our water stream. So yay for mineral sunscreen.
Yeah, and we will put a link to that. Not necessarily the products, but definitely some of the chemicals that you should be on the lookout for when you are buying sunscreen. But just usually, if you're just looking quickly, just using mineral sunscreen instead of the normal kinds of sunscreen is a better, safer option for your skin and also for the world around you.
Hooray! I think that brings us to the end of this episode. So as always, we'll have a link to the What You Can Do page in our show notes, the What You Can Do page from our website in the show notes, and you can also find it on our website under Tales of Saving Whales. It's just a really great list of small things that you can do every day to help cetaceans, marine life, and the planet.
Yeah, and you can also find all the links to subscribe to our podcast on the left-hand side of our website, right next to the Tales of Saving Whales section. And you can subscribe to it through the podcast, your podcast catcher of choice, however you're listening to it now, of course. And you can also listen to it directly on our site, if that's how you want to do it.
Yay! Other exciting items on our website include a link to our merch. You can find us on Redbubble and check out our awesome shirts, mugs, stickers, bags. We've got all kinds of cool stuff, and hope that you like it. And it helps to support our podcast and the rest of the stuff that we're doing with Whale Tales.
And if you're looking for another way to support us in the work that we do, you can head to our Patreon page. By becoming a patron, you can vote in polls to decide on what we'll talk about next, and you also get a shout out on social media, plus lots of fun and exciting rewards that we will be telling you about soon. We've got some big dreams for our future podcast episodes, and we can't do it without you, so please check it out. We're very excited to grow that community.
Yeah, and if you are unable to support us on Patreon, there's still lots of other ways you can help us. You can rate and review us on iTunes or anywhere else you might listen to podcasts. It helps other people find us and also lets us know what you think. We're just starting out. This is only our second episode, and we would love to hear your feedback to see what we should be doing.
Yay! You can follow us on social media at whaletales.org on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can search for podcast-specific posts by using the hashtag WhaleTalesPodcast.
And last but definitely not least, on our website, you can share your stories. Remember that it's not a big deal, it's not scary, you don't have to be an expert, and it doesn't have to have happened yesterday. If you've seen a cetacean, we would just love to hear about it, and we'd love to add your story to our library. So click on the share link on our site, or contact us on social media and tell us about your incredible cetacean encounter.
Yeah, and I know that was a lot of information about lots of different things that just happened in the last minute and a half. So, but don't worry, you can find the links to everything we just said on our website, which is whale-tales.org. Tales like the stories, not tales like the animals. Plus, while you're there, you can take a look at our library featuring over 500 different stories featuring all sorts of different whales, dolphins, porpoise species.
Thanks again for listening and supporting us. We'll be back again on the last Wednesday of next month with more fun facts, stories, and super nerdy trivia that Nicole has done a big deep dive into.
Yay! Happy Mother's Day to you moms. Happy upcoming Father's Day to you dads. And thanks everybody. Have a whaley great day.